Black the Name by D.B. Halbert. Narrated by the author, D.B. Halbert.
Chapter 4. The Pinnacle. Stepping past Pearl and Aldrin through the door, the young girl and her new-found companions step into the street. The black sky still rests over the landscape that the quaint town with its lights and walls rises from. For the number of streets and houses, the bastion of life that this town represents on the plane of the undead is quiet, with the scent of stale nothingness that sits in the air as the painfully familiar crunch grinds out from underneath Elizabeth's feet. The streets are not barren as the trio walk through them, and the citizens of the town go about their paths in apparent disinterest of the outsiders among them. Physically, the townsfolk do not have much in the way of differences from the three travelers, except for their sunk-in eye sockets and pale, almost white skin, the second trait of which Elizabeth to some extent shares with them. The way to the Pinnacle is not hard to find, as the large building rises above the tops of the other roofs. An even smaller inner portion of the small town lies sectioned off, another wall rising around the area within which the large Gothic building rises that Pearl, Aldrin, and Elizabeth were pointed to when they asked for the Pinnacle's location. Reaching the wooden gate, decorated with large metal baubles attached firmly to it, the group's progression is stopped by two armed guards. With jubilant, jaunting strides, Pearl pridefully steps toward the gate, her hips swaying naturally with each step. Rightfully arrogant of her attractive appearance, Pearl approaches the guards, who lower their halberds pointed to neck level, directed at the outsider's approach. Raising her hands, Pearl grins, speaking, "Whoa there, fellas. This is the entrance to the Pinnacle, right? Look, we have an appointment. We're Balasar's party. He couldn't come, but we did." One of the men erects his weapon, stepping through the small door in the gate, as the other raises his hand, responding, "We will have to confirm that. Wait here." Several awkward moments of silence pass, as the others join Pearl, where she soundlessly pouts, having not simply been let through. The guard returns after some time, and after whispering something into the other guard's ear, the two open the gate. The large wooden gate grinds slowly over the dust of the ground, revealing beyond the wall a sight alien to the environment around them that awaits within. Grass, a yard, life all around the structure they venture toward. Stepping through the gateway, the three strangers to this land are not less astonished than a native would be to see the juxtaposing green grass standing in opposition to the nothingness of the black sky. A cool, unnatural breeze wisps the blades of grass throughout the compound within the wall around the gorgeous, gaudy manor. The path beyond the gate changes from the gray powder into one of cobblestone that winds up to an old but well-kept and decorated porch. A man in a black robe, as dark as his hair, and the sky above him, stands with his arms behind his back, waiting for the approaching trio. Stepping forward again to take lead, Pearl's gait is the same as before. With a greeting smile, she throws her hand up, calling to the man. "Hey, sorry Balasar couldn't join us. So you can help us out, right?" The man's expression stays cold and unchanging as the outsiders continue approaching. At the point Pearl reaches the steps up to the porch, the figure turns and without a word strides into the building. Pearl stops for a second, confused, softly uttering, only at a level audible for her companions to hear, "I guess he wants to talk inside." Aldrin's hand falls onto Pearl's shoulder as he joins her at the base of the porch. Stepping past and up the short few stairs, he explains, "Pearl, we need this conversation to be serious, so perhaps you should try to calm down a bit." Pearl extends her tongue at Aldrin as he makes his way across the porch and into the house, but stops as Elizabeth, too, steps to the door being held open for them. And with a graceful bounce in her step, Pearl catches the others, whispering in her new young companion's ears. Aldrin is such a fuddy-duddy sometimes. Even with Pearl's hot breath in her ear, Elizabeth simply remains, staring forward, tightly grasping onto Boop's stone in her arms. Without a reaction from Elizabeth, Pearl stops just enough through the door for it to be closed, placing a fist on her hip as she leans her weight onto that side of her body, and under her breath sighs as she looks back to one of the windows. Not another person too serious for their own good. I miss you already, Balasar. The master will see you upstairs in his study. Follow me, the robed man explains, bowing and stepping up a small staircase. So he does speak, Pearl trumpets, with a small victory for herself, to which Aldrin's head turns with a glaring gaze. Pearl, please, be respectful, Aldrin growls, catching Elizabeth's vacant forward stare in the corner of his eye. Leaning down and putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, Aldrin seemingly breaks Elizabeth from a trance as he addresses her in concern. You all right? We won't be long here, but we need this to see if there is even a way for us to get home, okay? Elizabeth gazes into Aldrin's concerned, tired eyes, and giving him a nod, steadies herself, responding, I'm fine. Sorry to concern you. What are you looking at anyways? Nothing important. Aldrin turns to face down the corridor that lay straight from the front, through a black, painted open door where between him and a brightly glowing lit stove and oven sits a chopping block with a butcher's blade embedded into it at the point of separating a large slab of red meat in two, the angle of which causes only the black silhouette to be seen. Looking back confused how that visual would entrance someone, Aldrin's eyes find no Elizabeth as she instead stepped past him and began up the stairs. An odd contrast to the surrounding village sits upon this house as Pearl and Aldrin take but a moment to get a good look at its contents. Compared to the general atmosphere of the town that Pearl and Aldrin had come to know in the days they had been here, the manor's inside is surprisingly well furnished, with earth tones in the carpets and draperies. A plethora of knickknacks line the tables and walls, varying from animal heads to jeweled eggs, and the whole of the structure feels full of life, movement as servants go about their work, with the kitchen door swinging closed. Among all this, the thin, old, creaking staircase leads steadily up to a second and third floor, each a single hall lined with more tables and paintings, and several private rooms with their white doors closed. Standing by a door on the third floor, the black-robed man opens the passage, gesturing in, where another steep staircase leads up to another door, also closed. The master is waiting, if you would please. I will bring tea up momentarily. Could you bring up some wine for me? Pearl asks, patting the man's shoulder, stepping once again into the lead, now up the hallway staircase. Elizabeth and Aldrin follow Pearl upward, and as the three get about halfway, the door below them closes, and the one above them swings open. At the top of the stairs, a room whose ceiling arches with the outside contour of the roof, waits lined with bookshelves filled with old but well-kept tomes, cluttered desks, and 5 leather armchairs organized to face each other. Standing behind one of the desks is a thin-framed man, in clothes as gaudy as the manor appeared from the outside, the purple fabric pillows in the shoulders remaining tight to the rest of his gaunt form. Looking from the papers, the figure's stoic face holds a stark contrast to the general populace. In the glow of the light from the starlight windows, as his skin is not colorless, nor are his eyes sunk into their sockets, instead looking in contrast to those outside the wall that Pearl and Aldrin met. Healthy. Stepping around to the chairs and gesturing to the semicircle for the three to join him, the man speaks in a young, posh, regal, almost feminine voice. I was certainly hoping to meet the man of dragon heritage who set himself on fire in the Temple of Light, but his companions will do. Please, sit. Pearl, to Aldrin's dismay, once again takes lead, stepping into the room with prideful confidence in each step, and dropping into one of the red leather chairs, sinks in with a bounce as she says, "Well, we are sorry about that, but we have a few questions for you." "Pearl, please." "I'm sorry for my companion's arrogance, sir. We appreciate your admittance of us into your home," Aldrin explains, stepping past Elizabeth, apologizing profusely. As Aldrin's form blocks Elizabeth, her head drops with a voice somehow echoing in her head, in much the same way her voice had rung in Pearl's. A deep, malevolent voice that growls with a slimy, oppressive pressure.
"This is not one to trust. Hear his mind, child."
Elizabeth's body motions, not entirely against her will, passing her hands over her chest where an amulet even she had forgotten she was wearing rests. One that was given to her by Bartholomew, on which a crystal has infused itself. One that once was a holy symbol to Archangel. The crystal pulses through the cloth of Elizabeth's linen nightdress. Black veins grow slightly out from it onto the holy symbol's surface, like a vascular infection. From the pulse, glowing ribbons of purple energy weave through the air as Elizabeth's arm dance outward and around her, drawing a strange symbol within a circle in front of her, and placing her hands on her temples. The energy surges into her with a flash across the surface of her eyes, and she utters an alien phrase that binds the energy within her, which rings unnaturally loud through the room. Ilni. Books shake on their shelves with the utterance of the words of power from Elizabeth's lips, simultaneously returning control of her own body to her. Sudden looks of concern turn to face the young girl, the others in the room having been too occupied with themselves to notice her drawing the magic glyph, a display that only lasted a split moment. Pointing at Elizabeth with an exaggerated look of worry and confusion on his face, the host turns to Aldrin, not knowing his surface thoughts were now being heard by the strange child. "I am sorry, stranger. Is your young friend all right? Was that some sort of magic incantation?" "This confirms it. I must get rid of these people." Elizabeth looks up to the man's eyes, unsettling him further, pushing him to sink behind the chair, almost as though to hide from her, and she responds softly in an off-putting, monotoned cadence, unheard thus far by the other two. "I am fine, sir. Sorry for causing you concern. I believe Aldrin and Pearl have questions for you that may serve both your wants and their needs if you were to answer to your fullest possibility." Aldrin gives an accepting nod to Elizabeth before turning to the man hiding behind his chair and sitting down, addresses the pressing reason why he and Pearl sought the audience. Whatever is going on with this girl will have to wait until after we know a way off this plane. Sir, as I said, thank you for allowing us this audience in your abode, as so we may discuss matters of grave importance. As you pointed out, our companion Balasar has come to a madness that caused him to believe, to protect not only our group, but your town as well, he would have to physically burn sins from the flesh. While we don't agree with the extreme action taken, it shows proof that those of us not native to your land are in a position where it is only a matter of time before we, ourselves, succumb to the mental decay of this plane of existence. We come to you as it is our understanding that if anyone were to know how to leave this plane, it would be you. Or at least that's the hope. With Aldrin beginning to speak, the figure slowly emerges from behind the chair, walking around and sitting uncomfortably down into it, never breaking his gaze interlocked with Elizabeth's. What is with this kid? You either have good sources or great intuition. I do know stories of ways to leave this plane of existence, but I will require something from you, though, for me to provide you with the information I know. The little help ancient tales will be for you. Elizabeth continues to stare into the man as each person in the room's thoughts whisper in her head clear as they speak. And before anyone can inquire what their host would ask of them, she breaks in, standing in the doorway. You would ask us to leave and never return, even if the options you lay before us lead us to nothing. Surprise jolts across Aldrin and Pearl's face as Elizabeth speaks, quickly steadying into serious looks at each other and their host, who shifts into a knowing, contemplative pose, responding, Drat, how could she predict that? Well, no point holding back now. The child is correct. As you pointed out, you are outsiders, and the fine balance required for stability of a society in this place is threatened by your very presence. Please buy this. The robed figure from before steps into the room behind Elizabeth, with a large silver tray in his grasp, bringing with him the smell of fresh tea and seasoned, seared red meat. First stepping to the master of the manor, the robed servant reveals on the tray a set of jeweled teaware, pouring the tea into one of the cups, adding a scoop of sugar, and taking the cup as well as a small hors d'oeuvre. The master waves the robed figure to move along to the guests. With a bow, the robed figure obeys, with the acknowledging statement, Yes, sir, Master Kane. After a few moments, each person has a glass filled with a beverage of their liking, tea for 3 and wine for Pearl, and a small pastry with meat and cheese. I believe, Master Kane, that we are like-minded when it comes to the belief that it would be best that we are not to return after the moment we are to find any possibility of return to our home you may direct us to. Aldrin dutifully elucidates as he sips his cup. Almost as though rehearsed, Pearl breaks in as Aldrin finishes. But the thing is, we are a bit low on traveling supplies, as getting here depleted a fair portion of our rations as it is. Would you be willing in aiding us in resupplying? Master Kane's face becomes stern as the robed servant leaves the room. They have the nerve to attempt to set terms? No, this I will not do. With a shrug and a passing off wave, Pearl returns the groan. Was worth a shot at least. Man, we just can't catch a break. Kane fights the surprise from trying to surface on his face. She didn't even care what I answered. Who are these people? Who is this kid? So, companions of the one named Balasar, do we have an accord? I provide you with what I know, and you are gone by the morning. Aldrin nods. I will guarantee it. Very well. Standing from his seat and stepping to one of the bookcases, Kane returns with the 2 oldest, least well-kept books from within the collection, releasing from the shelf an even older, weathered page without a book of its own. When the lone page strikes the ground, a wave of energy bursts out across the floor that only Elizabeth seems to acknowledge, or is even able to witness. Setting the old tomes onto a small tea table within the chair circle's center, Kane doesn't notice Elizabeth step to the page, driven by curiosity to open it. Kane looks to Aldrin, pointing to the words on the page of the tome as he begins to orate. My family is the Great Dimlight family, which you probably never heard of. My ancestors are responsible for the safe transport and protection of the entire populace of this town, an experiment that was performed in an attempt to extend mortal lives indefinitely, which obviously didn't work. The rift that was used for the transportation still exists, though not here. It is a 10-day journey north, protected by that shadow dragon. That was where we were told the dragon is, right, Aldrin? Pearl breaks in. Balasar wanted to deal with that for the townspeople anyway. Aldrin turns to Pearl, baffled at the mere suggestion. What are you even thinking, Pearl? It's a dragon! We didn't agree to it, and based on the nature of what may or may not be guarding that exit, it may be in our best interest to hear the other option. Thank goodness. That dragon is keeping my people afraid. And them being afraid is a great way for me to stay in power. Certainly. Kane opens the second book. The othered rumor way out of here is a compound to attempt to venture to a 10-day journey south. Through the land of the collector, there is rumor that there a temple waits known by those who would seek it as the Temple of 12. It is said, if you make it, you will be granted one wish. You could use that to transport back to your plane of existence. The door slams open as the robed individual yells panicked to Kane, his thoughts a deafening cacophony of fearful screams and personal pleas. Dragon! The dragon is coming! Immediately standing upon receiving this frightening information, Kane begins to usher his guests to leave. Well, circumstances call for this meeting to end here. Now, outsiders, if you would please leave. Be fast about it. I need to hide. Aldrin and Pearl step a short distance down the staircase when Pearl turns back to see Elizabeth almost angrily standing, staring at Kane. Elizabeth! Still in the room, Elizabeth squints, focusing on Kane, who returns a look of confusion for a moment before having his head submerged in lard and an octopus massaging his scalp. Thoughts from his inner psyche, more concealed than those of his mind's surface, are drawn forcefully out. Terror momentarily takes his face, and Elizabeth's focus on him intensifies with the dark purple energy of before, allowing Kane, as the subject, to see it radiating out in pulsing tendrils that penetrate his temples. Kane's deep thoughts moan, echoing outward, audible only for himself and Elizabeth, almost as raw emotions of fear of a possible uprising from his people and seething anger against the newcomers, specifically Balasar, forgetting the populace to speak of hope beyond the wall. Terror grows to hate as Kane thinks of how the little girl had been reading his mind the entire time. The energy fades, leaving the two staring at each other, and Elizabeth sends her voice into Kane's head. So, about aiding our effort to resupply, as so we can be out of your town sooner? Lifting one of his clenched angry fists shaking into the air, Kane points to the staircase, holding back the anger that would normally make him yell, "Get out!" Pearl and Aldrin, not able to witness the exchange of Kane's thoughts or even Elizabeth's energy, which drew the thoughts out, leap up the stairs, taking Elizabeth's shoulders. Aldrin begins apologizing as Pearl leans into Elizabeth's ears, whispering, "What did you do?" Turning and stepping down the stairs, with each of the two adults flanking her, Elizabeth leads the group from the building. The green front door is opened before them by the robed figure as they step down the final few steps, and passing through the open door, they are accosted by a sweeping wind that nearly throws them back into the building. Pushing forward, the three make their way to the gate as the white powder of the outer grounds washes over the wall's top and down around their feet. Violently, the wind ruffles Elizabeth's nightdress and Pearl's coattails, while throwing back both of their hair in almost straight columns behind them.